Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar on stop managing PPAP submissions with spreadsheets and email. I think this whole subject is a new view for most executives about risk containment and cost avoidance using the production part approval process. Back in November, I did a similar session, but it was really just driven about lawsuits, especially from supplier PPAPs. But the feedback from the participants were they're having a problem getting executive buy-in and maybe buy-in from understanding. So this is an updated version of that event that adds a little more information. From a housekeeping standpoint, the phones are muted. The recording will be available for your review, and we can schedule a private event for your team as well. We do have time for Q&A at the end, so enter your questions into the question box. But what we really want to talk about is the experience over the last 3 years working with volunteers that use spreadsheets daily to do this, and sharing with you what they wanted and what they did not want in software technology. Now, this is not a software demo. However, I did speak with some of the attendees on today's event that asked me to include some screenshots to help visualize the solution I'm describing, so I put those in. But there's also a detailed slide deck you can download from the GoToWebinar menu you have. If you want to learn more about the software, just let me know. We can do something private for your team. But this is really about the challenges that companies are having. Now, intended audience, we have a great mix of attendees today across multiple industries: aerospace, consumer products, food products, medical device, and more. And it's an interesting mix of very large OEM companies and smaller suppliers. But for today, I'm hoping that you already know what production part approval process is. So I'm not going to teach you about PPAP. Again, it's going to talk about common issues and challenges that companies face with PPAP, why they're facing them, and some ideas on how to solve them. So hopefully you have experience trying to do PPAP with email and spreadsheets, or another big system that's basically annoying, cumbersome, and you want to go back to spreadsheets. You may or may not have required supplier PPAPs, but if you do, that's even more cumbersome when you go outside your plant. Now, PPAPs being adopted across multiple industries. Aerospace adopted AS 9145 and the AS 13004. The food industry is going from ingredient certifications to process. AdvaMed published supplier PPAP guidance. FMEAs are almost everywhere. But again, depending on what industry you're in, there's either a negative view of PPAP, a neutral one that's kind of like a whatever we got to do, but there's some positive ones that say, no, this is a real opportunity for improvement. But we don't have PPAP or APQ. We have certificate conformance. We do first articles. We don't make high volume parts, so why do this? And most organizations are just looking at recalls, warranty, scrap costs, and they're trying to look at it. And so whether it's the 14,000 environmental view, 14,971 for medical devices, even health and safety assessments, there's a lot of opportunity to learn from this. So just to share some of those, what's going on, that we have some medical device companies on, so I put this slide in. Risk management is a C-level issue in pharmaceuticals and life sciences. The FDA published guidelines that strategies is using production part approval process are compatible with GMP and have been successfully deployed. Interesting enough is that PPAP, a strong PPAP process, is being touted in some companies' annual reports. They consider a strong PPAP process a company asset, a strength, not just this annoying thing that quality people have to do because our customers make us do it before we can ship parts. So it is getting some C-level recognition, but there's still a lot of frustrations. Now again, the executive groups are responding, but I get this feeling that as we go lower and lower in the organization, other people have given up. We can't do this because of ITAR. We can't do this because of FDA restrictions, or whatever excuse you're using. Try passing an ITAR audit with spreadsheets and a USB drive. You know, well, we do it this way. We've always done it this way. Just fill out the spreadsheet and send it in. You know, our customers tell us to use this form. Just fill out the form. And one of the very common ones, when you get up in the executive team, we're going to talk about this a little bit. You know, didn't we already buy software to do this? So to get a feel for this, we did a voice of the customer survey, and not a big surprise. 85% of the survey respondents use spreadsheets to manage FEMA's control plans, process flows. Keeping track of the task list, again, APQP and PPAP is at a big level, project management. But, you know, FMEA, action items, checklists, other issues, again, spreadsheets are manual, major response. And when we asked them what they like to use, and I remember what they like to use is essentially spreadsheets. They like it because it's easy and flexible. But they love spreadsheets and they hate spreadsheets. I mean, it's a love-hate relationship. So the question is, if product launch, new product introduction, whatever term you want to use, is a critical business process, and it is, without a doubt, why is it being done in Excel? All sorts of reports. 90% of spreadsheets have errors. One industry certification body last year reported 400 major findings and 6,000 minor audit findings on control plans. It's like, well, how could that be? I mean, control plans in this particular industry have been around for decades. How can we still have problems with control plans? And the answer is pretty straightforward. When you're using Excel, things get broken. And I put something in the process flow and I didn't make it to the control plan, or I updated something in the FEMA and it didn't make it in the control plan. So this lack of linkage and lack of ability to put it together breaks. And that's one of the things they hate about spreadsheets. It's flexible. I can do whatever I want with it, but there's risk with it. So here's the challenges that organizations are wrestling with. You know, is this an ERP? Didn't we buy ERP or some PLM thing or some quality thing, that software thing that was supposed to help me with this? And that's kind of the wrong question. You know, the challenge that's been going on is a lot of the people that are frustrated with enterprise systems are people that make parts, not people that design them. And what the volunteers were asking for is, I'd like something better than spreadsheets, but I don't want it too complicated, because if it gets too complicated, I'm going back to spreadsheets. And the frustration when you get down to the people that work with this PPAP every day, they're trying to stuff PPAP stuff in something they already bought and it doesn't work. Or they're putting these standalone spreadsheets in the K drive or SharePoints or some PLM folder. It just makes it worse, because now, without a coherent review, these records now are available. And I mentioned the legal issue I did in November. We'll talk about that a little bit. But you know, basically, this is focused on people that make parts. And the challenge is, don't force a system design application on them. It gets too complex. So again, the goal is, I want it better than Excel, but if it gets too complex, I'm going back to spreadsheets. So I've used this diagram a lot with executive teams to try to explain, didn't we already buy this? You know, why do we need another one? You know, we bought ERP and that helped us in accounting, of course, which made sense. Doing accounting and spreadsheets is just kind of silly to even think about this day. The accountant said we had too much inventory, so we put in some inventory controls. Engineering stepped up to the table and said, we got to get off these drafting tables. I'm giving away my age. And we gave them CAD system, which was great. And we couldn't find the documents there, so we gave them PDM system, which is great. But then they wanted some workflows, so we bought PLM systems. You know, MES is the ops are getting some support. Marketing and sales is getting support with CRM, Salesforce type apps. But this whole quality PPAP thing is this blue box in the middle that 85% of the people are using spreadsheets. So if you double click and go down a level, this is probably one of the most powerful diagrams I've used in the last year, trying to explain to big companies the difference between big PLM apps, enterprise quality apps, and some in the middle that really just focus on APQP and PPAP, is that they're very good, they're very powerful, but their design is for research and development at the tech center, the groups that design systems. I have an airplane. The airplane has an engine. The engine has, but what I'm talking about now is the gap between this high-level system design and your plants and suppliers that make parts. I mean, their thought of the world is, you guys design it, we make it. So here's my one advice. Don't try to force a software design for R&D and tech centers into the people making parts. It never works. If you try to take it down to suppliers, they won't use it. They don't want to pay for it. There was one volunteer that was going through some of the larger specialized companies, and almost every one of the presentations started with, well, first of all, you start with the system design and you do a DFMEA. And the volunteer was telling me the story. He said, well, he raised his hand and goes, stop, we don't do DFMEAs. And the software demo said, well, you got to do the DFMEA because that's where you start. And that was a very detailed software example, but one of the other ones that's really important is the design and tech center people, they think differently. They should, by the way, this isn't a negative comment. They think differently. They use different terms. They say, hey, we want let's use they want the inside of the car to be quiet. That's the requirement. Well, when I'm down to making parts, it's like, all right, well, what do I have to do to make it quiet? I can't say make the part quiet. So just an example of the conflict of it. So here's the idea is, can we come up with something better than spreadsheets, but not too complex? Keep it simple. And for the people that have some of the larger apps, just think of this as a document authoring tool. Some way to get parts and part characteristics and ops and process characteristics to feed into the process flow, PFEMA, and control plan. Gauge studies, of course, would be nice. And if you don't have any other project management tool, some way to just say, here's the project, here's the task, and here's the things we're working on. Now, if you can, connect it to ERP and PLM, absolutely. If you have a parts list, we want to connect to that. We'll talk a little bit more about the critical intersection with PLM to get characteristics. That's a critical step, both internally and with suppliers. But before we get into that much detail, one of the things that I put in today's presentation based on the November feedback is I started with risk management and the impact of PPAP on risk management. And it is a company-wide process involving all departments. But what would something like this look like? So when the volunteers said they like spreadsheets, but can we do it better? They want a spreadsheet-like stuff. Well, first of all, they want a spell checking, and not spreadsheet spell checking where you got to do it for the whole thing every time. No, they want real-time spell checking, like any other app that they're used to using. Yeah, you can sort columns, you can filter columns, you can move columns around like Excel, but they also wanted smart searches. So I can't remember the part name, but it was a seat something, a seat assembly, I don't remember. So this is kind of the basic stuff they wanted, which of course makes sense. And these are the screenshots I put in to just give you an idea of what the design strategy was. They also want things, and I don't know if any of you are currently looking at the new AIG VDA FMEA, a little different in how it's laid out and what it does. But long story short, in Excel or any other app, it gets kind of wide really fast. So, the ability to pin columns, like you can in a spreadsheet, temporarily freeze a column in place while scrolling back and forth. So the ability to freeze panes, that was one of the things they liked. They also said, well, if I can freeze it, can I also hide it? So the ability to temporarily hide columns for the purpose of getting relevant information into view. So again, better than Excel. Don't let me break anything, but this is some cool stuff I really like. Now, as a result of the, and again, this is volunteers that use spreadsheets every day to do PPAP. And as I mentioned, we did the process flow, the PFMEA, and the control plan, and of course DFMA is there if you need it. But this CTS view was a real eye opener. And long story short, what it talked about is if you look at the data that's in a process flow, PFMEA control plan, it's really just a single database with different views. So what they asked for is, and this is where we go a little bit beyond Excel, and this is how you avoid breaking linkages and all those issues. If I could have a view that would show me all the data across all these forms, that would be great. Because that way, if it's in a database, I can't break it. I can't accidentally put a process op in or a process step that's not in the process flow PFMEA control plan because it's a database. If I put it in, I put it in. Now, again, there's all sorts of other cool stuff about this that we don't have time to go through today, but this was a real aha moment. The other thing that they asked for, I said, you know what, John, after we get all these forms done, we put it all together, you know, the real annoying part is how do I create a zip file or something that I'm either going to submit around internally or I'm going to send to my customer. So all they wanted was a simple publish project button. And what that would do is when you hit it, it would bring up all the tasks from your project task list, and you can click on which ones that you want to be part of the submission. Now, this was interesting because the thought process was, you know, some of the volunteers did full submissions, some customers wanted partial submissions, some customers reviewed and did a conditional approval, but then they came back and said, I want to see an updated control plan and your test results. So they wanted the flexibility to just hit this button, pick what I want to do, create a zip file, give me all the attachments that I need to send, and give me a project summary. So like spreadsheets, but better. The other thing that was really important was the ability to just store a snapshot of the forms for archiving, a version control, if you will. Now, not necessarily version control, well, actually it is like PLM, version control, where I don't need to keep track of every change everywhere, every time. But if the team is signing off or looking at this and we want to do a snapshot of it, the ability to mark it as a release. That really helps controlling in submissions, what was submitted, what was sent out to the shop floor. So again, within the relational database, save a version of that so I don't have the problem of trying to find the spreadsheet file with the right date and time or whatever we send out. Now here's a very interesting one. This one was one of the volunteers said, look, either get rid of the right side of the FMEA or make it useful, because nobody ever uses the right side of the FMEA. And I go, come on, nobody uses it? You go, oh, no, we type something in there because our customers expect us to type us in there, but how can I keep track of that? I mean, I have it's just 10 different parts going through this. There's action items across all of them assigned to different people. I can't, well, if I'm trying to keep track of that in Excel, I'm going to open up another spreadsheet and try to keep track of who's assigned what. So they said, in this database, can you just put together either a list of just mine or all of these tasks that are assigned to people so the right side of the form on the FMEA can come to life. So again, like a spreadsheet, but a little bit better. And then the other one was, you know, look, I've got a whole bunch of different customers. They have different, I mean, they're all basically the same forms, but they don't call it ops, they call it process. They don't call it product characteristic. They call it, okay, a form configurator. Now what this means is when you're entering the database and you're putting the information in, you can basically design a form any way you want. And that's kind of cool, but it's not really the important part. The important part is you can have a common, consistent training deployment approach within your organization. And when you're all done, when you're ready to submit, and I'm talking about a customer submittal now, if you're ready to submit, you can just say, oh, I want to submit it using this form. and it will change the headers and change the information and change the characteristics. So it's very specific. So again, that was being done in spreadsheets by file save as, trying to change things, and it was just a mess. The other one was, yeah, if you can just give us a couple email notifications if I'm assigned in a task or in a project to do something, can you just send me a reminder note? So that was pretty straightforward. But back to risk management, back to this idea of, okay, that's the cool stuff that we want better in Excel. This was the original slide in November event, and it was talking about who needs to manage the risk. This is a very important slide for big and small companies. PPAP is not a QA thing. It's not a supplier. PPAP is a QA thing. And if you're having a hard time getting management's attention, they don't read your reports or your emails. You go out and talk to them, ask their opinion, ask their ideas, ask them for help. So whether it's legal, marketing, finance, engineering, purchasing, ops, quality, if you engage them seeking assistance and trying to figure this out, it works. So here's some of the conversations you can have. Again, legal, this was in November. Long story short, lawyers, especially for product liability, injury claim issues, have been asking for show me the FMEA for a long time. That's not new. What I learned late last year is the lawyers are now saying, oh, this is a purchase part, really? Show me the supplier PPAP. Now, they're not trying to go after the suppliers, especially small suppliers that don't have the money. They're trying to show that your organization asked for the supplier to verify how they produce parts, and you approved it, but you didn't really. And when I say you didn't really, because these spreadsheets are flying around in emails, and maybe they went through a supplier portal and put in a PLM system somewhere or a SharePoint somewhere, it's still a spreadsheet. And here's what I've learned. When you go talk to the engineers that have to do this every day, PPAP approvals are annoying, they're time consuming, and they're usually done when purchasing calls and says, hey, you need to approve that because the supplier can't ship. And in some cases, they don't do any review at all. They click on approve and it's done. So that was the legal view. And again, talk to your attorneys. They'll understand that. Marketing, look, and that's why I'm very happy with the variety of companies on today's event. You've seen all the high profile recalls. You've seen the 737. You've seen the Roundup, the talcum powder, the food recalls. It's damaging. And let's just say it's not necessarily financially devastating. The company can absorb the hit. But what marketing cares about is the reputation of the companies. That's really hard to recover. So marketing cares about this. Ask them about it. Explain to them how a robust production part approval process can protect the brand. Finance. You know, finance people are really nice people, believe it or not. You know, they like numbers, they like audits, and they're really the source that's critical for looking at how much is this thing going to cost and what's our ROI. They can also provide information for the internal business support, not just the external financial reports. And I got a critique when I made that comment at a public event, and they said, no, that's not true. Our finance department, all they focus on is the stockholders' financial reports. And I said, all right, well, there's got to be somebody, what do you call it, finance, what do they call it, accounting, but somebody knows failure costs because finance has to track it. If we scrap parts, we have to know that because I have to get more in inventory. If we can't get paid because we can't ship, it's impacting cash flow. So there's a lot of ways, but for this slide, the real takeaway is if you can't get justification to make a business investment in improving the production part approval process, you need to get finance and accounting involved. You need their help right away. So many professionals I've talked to said, oh man, I've given up. I spent 6 months trying to go through this. When it comes down to capital appropriation, I get shut down. And my advice was, then you need to get them involved early, up front. ask their advice, ask for their help. One of the first capital appropriations I ever did, I was a very young quality director in an aerospace company. Long story short, I went and asked for help because I've never done a capital appropriation. I didn't even know I didn't learn it in school. I didn't know how to do it. So I went out and I asked for help. When it came for approval and I was asked, how do you know these numbers are right? I turned to the person that helped me and I said, oh, they helped me. And they smiled and nodded and said, oh yeah, I've gone through this with John. All the numbers are right. So again, another tip, get them involved early. Now engineering, this is where some of the confusion about, didn't we already buy a PLM app that does all this stuff? But engineering has to provide complete and accurate information, including lessons learned from similar parts. And that's where their awareness of FMEAs and the right side of the form and lessons learned is important. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole 3D versus 2D drawings and what's being provided, but parts or family of parts drive characteristics. And driving characteristics list is critical, whether it's internal or you providing that to your suppliers. If you're just sending them a PDF of a 2D drawing and say, go at it, first of all, it puts a lot of time and cumbersome on a plant or a supplier. But more importantly, if they don't have some kind of ballooning functionality, they're gonna wing it. An intern's gonna look at the drawing and try to put numbers on it and type stuff in. And hopefully I got them all, most of them, and I think, and I'm pretty sure I entered most of them right. But back, the diagram on this slide is if you go back to finance and most of the people, this is just a comparison about two different programs, the blue and the red one. And the blue one had a lot of engineering changes in design. Not as many in prototype, pre-production, they got rid of some stuff. Production, they were making parts. Program A is complete opposite. Which one, and again, I use this slide, this picture with executives, say, which one do you think was more profitable? And they can pretty quickly guess, well, program A, we got to get done up front. So that's how engineering is. But let's spend a little bit more time on this whole new product introduction. Again, regardless of what industry you're in, you might not call it APQP, you might not call it PPAP, but everybody brings new products to market. Well, the products are getting more complex, and with higher complexity becomes higher risk. There's a lot going on. So the time to create these parts, the time to compile them, the information, the time to review it, it's a lot of time. And that last slide we're showing, well, look, at prototype is intended to get all that stuff out. Pre-production, yeah, there might be some, but by the time we get to production and hopefully service and aftermarket, we're good. But shorter time to market requires robust processes to support it. And robust does not mean standalone spreadsheets. Spreadsheets have really become an underground app, preferred by people that have to get stuff done. They just have to get it approved. They got to fill it out. So automotive, aerospace, medical device, food, consumer products, pick an industry. One of the things that's very common about it is they all point to problems in the supply chain as their higher risk. Whether it's true or not, in most cases it is. But the bottom line is the further down the chain, the higher the risk. Now, the problem with that is the further down the chain, we keep sending spreadsheets or PDF files to suppliers and expect them to do something with it. A great research by LNS Research talked about new product introductions. And basically what they said is teams that have no systems were more likely to be dissatisfied with their ability to collaborate. I mean, they're frustrated. And email and spreadsheets and meetings are not letting the teams quickly get feedback from each other. Companies that have purchased quality system for new launches are likely to be successful. But systems using general purpose software spreadsheets are not. So there's a lot of data saying this is an area that needs some help. All right, purchasing. Purchasing really needs to define the supplier expectations. And I don't mean just the standards, terms, and conditions, but if you do, and interesting enough, in the companies that are moving forward with this, I've asked executives, do you do supplier PPAPs? And either it's a yes, no, or no, it's coming. But you got to define that process. And, you got to figure out your goal. I mean, is PPAP a cost add to the supplier or cost savings? And interesting one, I had a supplier ask me, he said, well, it'd be nice if they thought that a good PPAP process justified the higher cost. He was frustrated. He goes, look, purchasing just buys from low price suppliers. And again, a little tip here. Purchasing doesn't necessarily know why you should get a higher price. So I'm suggesting, this is for suppliers to customer now, as part of your sales process, include information like, this is how we're going to make it, process flow. These are the risks, PFMEA, and this is how we control the risk, control plan. And then ask the buyer, hey, does your supplier have the same robust process to minimize your risk? I'm not saying it's there yet, but you should really try that. I've had some good results with that. So what are the supplier PPAP benefits to you if you're going to do it? Yeah, we can get confidence in your suppliers and their production process. We can avoid unapproved parts in the production lines, make it easier to find things early on. That's all good stuff. But remember, the lawyers are coming and they're looking for your negligence in poorly done supplier PPAP review. So what should the goals of that be? Hold the supplier responsible for the ability to produce parts. If you provide them with a robust process, if you provide them with your product characteristics information, if you provide them with data, not just documents, it's gonna get better, but you have to, in order to do this, you have to make sure that PPAP reviews are actual reviews. All right, ops, manufacturing. I started manufacturing as a co-op student in an automotive facility. And at 17 years old, I started working every hourly position in the plant. I grew up in the plant. I'm a plant person. And I will tell you, 100% of the time, the people making the parts need to be involved because they know a lot about a lot. They have experience about, hey, if this happens, how bad is it? Will this happen? And they offer things like, well, yeah, it could, but if you did this, it would error-proof it and wouldn't do it anymore. And even on detection, hey, the way you guys are checking this is really not the best way to do it. This works better. And we really need to make sure receiving inspections issues, whatever we find in receiving, we always go back to the PPAP. We always go back to the FMEA. I mean, the stories about operators and engineers go on forever. This is how the engineers designed it, but this is how we build it. Ops and operators and people in the plant need to be involved. Now, by the way, a similar comment on this is, if you're looking at a way to improve the PPAP submission process, some software technology besides spreadsheets and email, you have to have the people that do PPAP and spreadsheets every day a part of the process. Because if not, the ERP people are going to say, we do that. The PLM people are going to say, we do that. The QMS people say, oh yeah, we do PPAP. But until you get down to the people, the volunteers I've worked with for the last 3 years that do this every day, you're not going to get what you want. All right, quality, I said earlier, quality is not a PPAP thing, but we really got to look at compliance and continuous improvement. And this question, the big red question is your company at risk because of poor PPAP? You need to go out and find out right now by performing a cross-functional internal audit. You need to pull those PPAP approvals, internal or suppliers, either one, and you need to see how well they're being done. By the way, just like a financial audit, financial people get that. They like that. When you go in and say, I performed an internal audit on how we're doing, they understand. And one of the things that is really powerful, if you can get accountants involved, is look at what was on the FMEA and compare it with the warranty and recall data. And here's what I mean. We had scrap, rework, recall, warranty, whatever you call it. The question we got to be asking ourselves is, did we know about this and miss it? Or did we not know about it and we need to add it? Or was it worse than we thought? So you really, again, got to look at the process. Now, this is an interesting diagram out of the AIG PPAP manual, and it's a flowchart example. But the volunteers I worked with, they said, no, that's not how it looks like. So we went up to the grease board. And first volunteer, as an engineer, I flow charted, okay, this is how you do it. I asked volunteer B, this is how you do it. And he laughed and he goes, no. So we did his version of it. And then the third volunteer said, excuse me for a minute. Third volunteer said, no, I have a different way as well. Sorry about that. I have a different way as well. In fact, one of them said, look, I had the same part under 3 different revisions under PPAP for 3 different customers. They all want it different. So, it's here's one of the questions that came up, because a lot of the folks will say, well, we need workflow. And whatever you think it is, that's probably what it actually is and what it should be. So what we're trying to figure out now is, and this is where a lot of we got advanced workflow, it'll do this, this, and this. You can design it any way you want. So again, if you go back and talk to the people that use spreadsheets and email to do this currently, and you ask them if they need workflow, the answer is no. Remember the published project? What I need to have is an easy way to do this. And the volunteers are very interested about, look, I'm just trying to get something better than spreadsheets and email. I'm not trying to have the computer do my job for me. That's what I do. And I can't tell you how many large companies, IT departments are, well, you got to have workflow. Well, that's not what the people need. When in doubt, let humans decide and take baby steps. That's probably one of the other big lessons. Give me something better in spreadsheets. But if it's too cumbersome, I'm going back to spreadsheets. I was at another conference last year where I went through this conversation, and corporate VP of quality came up to me and said, John, we've tried 3 different very, very expensive PLM apps to just take care of what you talked about. They all failed. And it wasn't until I heard you explain what you just went through that I understand why. It's really difficult to take people that are making parts and using spreadsheets and just jump them into an enterprise system design hierarchical build. It's tough. It can't happen. So if I can just, let's say in the next 3 years, we took a baby step and went from Excel to something better, that would work. Now, this is another thing that the volunteers asked for. I don't need workflow. You know what I really want is, it would be great with a single click of the mouse. I could just see what I have to work on, stuff assigned to me. Here's the task you have to do. Here's what we're trying to get with it. Here's the right side of the FEMA. Here's the action items and the FEMA you need to do. If you give me that, I'm a happy camper. So again, just talking to the people doing this on a daily basis. So if you look at supplier PPAP process flow, and again, this can happen before a purchase order, but in general, purchase orders drive the request. I got to know a part number, revision level. I want to emphasize again, engineering has to get me the part data, and I really need product characteristics and ballooning of the prints. If you have a DFMEA and you'll share it, that'd be nice. Theoretically, we're supposed to work together on this. That's still an issue in some industries. But then I fill out I do the process, I fill out the paperwork, I come back to you, and then we go through the review process. I mean, that's in general how it goes. So recommended solution. We got to be database driven. We've got to have better security than K drives and USB sticks. There is some reporting analytics we can do, but if your company's having a hard time maintaining data, that's because the spreadsheets are limited. to validate input and have safeguards that can be easily bypassed or ignored. And it results in compromised and inaccurate data. And a lot of it remains unnoticed. Oh, we can't do this database. Spreadsheets are too hard to learn. Well, most employees that interact with a system like this, they really just need to know how to fill out a form and click on an icon. The only people that have to have in-depth knowledge are programmers, and they're not doing the form creations. Oh, we always use spreadsheets. Yeah, you always may have used a screwdriver as a crowbar, but it doesn't make it the right tool. If you're creating a budget, use a spreadsheet. But if you're maintaining non-numerical data, use a database. Even most financial data is on a database. That's why we bought those accounting systems a long time. Oh, these files aren't that big. We don't need a database. Well, I've heard that so many times. And after they've been messing around with them for a while, even on small parts, I'm not saying it has to be complex parts, of course, there's a lot of them. But there's like 30 rows, 50 rows, 150 rows. The version control issue we talked about. By the way, if you've been using spreadsheets, when those things start getting big, yeah, it's opening. No, the file's still opening. It's not open yet. I mean, they get out of control because they weren't intended to do that. The searches and views, we talked about how to do it. And again, I need to emphasize enough on security, especially the aerospace company's been talking to with ITAR requirements and whatnot. But long story short, yes, the result of all this research and all this work has a solution for part manufacturers. You can be on cloud or on-premise, single instance, multi-tenant. You can get a corporate view against all your plants, all your suppliers. We'll do the integration with the ERP, PLM, and QMMS. It's a Microsoft technology stack, but it's an app designed by operators. And when I say operators, I'm not in production now, but people that use Excel to do this every day of their life. And it includes what they liked and what they didn't like. One last thing I want to talk about before we get into some Q&A is reporting and analytics. When you now start getting into a database and you get all this information in the database, you can do some pretty exciting stuff. What are the top 10 issues I need to know about? What actions are being taken? Did we get better? Did we get worse? Of course, the single click of the mouse, what do I have to work on today? Show me RPNs or action priority numbers by product, by process, by op, by failure mode, by cause. There's a whole lot of things that can now be done in the database world. So we have some time for questions. Well, again, if you have them, go ahead and enter them into the question block. Let me paraphrase some of these. The first one is a CTS view. Can you explain that again? The CTS view is a single database that has all the information across all the forms, the process flow, the PPAP, and the control plan. And that was an eye-opener when realizing the way the spreadsheets got broken was based on changing things in a worksheet and not change them in other ones. So that gave them the ability to see everything. And then the other tabs were, well, I just want to see the process flow. I just want to see the PFEMA or control plan. Another question came up, is DFMEA in the scope of this tool? The answer is yes. DFMEA is included. Question, can you develop custom APQP or PPAP task lists? The answer is yes. Again, at that level, it's really a project management tool where you can just build whatever tasks you want. There's a task template library. So you can say for this customer, they want 18 things. For this customer, they want 7. So yeah, there's complete flexibility in setting up the task. All right, this is an interesting one. What if we already have a big PLM type app? The best way I think to talk to both executives, IT and engineering about that is what I'm describing with the CTS tool. Here, use this term. I want to use the CTS tool for document authoring, and we'll use PLM for document management. If you need workflow, we can put all that into PLM as well. So let me say it this way, don't try to challenge the investment in PLM. Don't try to say it was stupid, it's not working. Suggest that here's how I'm doing it now. Here's the problems I'm having. This is, again, I use the word baby step a lot. This is a baby step that can get us closer and faster to what we're doing. A similar answer to, we already have a QMS app that's supposed to do all this. I'm advocating that in the QMS space, go out and make sure the people authoring the documents on what they're doing, because executive perceptions, I'll tell you a story on this. I had an executive that said, you know, QMS app blank already does all this. We don't need this. And I said, oh, by the way, I'm sorry, this was an ERP app. It wasn't QMS. It already does all this. That was their perception. That's what they were sold. That's what they wrote a check for. I said, can I just go out and talk to the people that are doing this work? Long story short, the punchline is, when I talk to the people that are doing this day to day, and again, this is like going out and talk to the operators in the shop, guess what they told me? I do it all in Excel and then I upload it to the app. So on both PLM, QMS, both those questions kind of combined, just go out and check, see how it's currently being done. There's nothing better than talking to executives or people with the money and saying, I went out and did an audit. Here's what I found. Here's the problems they're having. Here's the impact on it. Another question, does the app have spell checking? Yes, I showed that very quickly on one screen. That was just kind of a cosmetic thing that some of the volunteers said, I've done submissions on this and had spelling errors in it. It was kind of embarrassing. So instead of asking the spreadsheet or forgetting to ask the spreadsheet to do spell check, it would do it real time. Let's see what we else got here again. Keep them coming. We got some time left. Are the names of the person who made changes kept in this app? The answer is yes. There's actually a complete audit trail down to every change by every person in every area. So all that details there, but the revision screen I flashed by real quick it was almost too information. I don't need to know, who exactly went in and did this and changed this. I just need to be able to have some publishing control on it. But yes, there's a complete train edit. I'm not sure there's a question or supportive, but it was just talking more about needing workflow. There is, of course, on every task, who's it's assigned to, the whole concept of electronic signatures and signups and all that stuff. But let me, again, I don't know if there's a question or a supportive comment, but let me show you one more part of that. Theoretically, in some of these processes, you can't go to step 2 until you finished everything in step 1. And again, conceptually, that's correct. The reality is that never happens. I shouldn't say never. That hardly ever happens. I'm doing whatever I got to do to get these parts out. By the way, more parts, more complex, faster, shorter launch times. Get it done, get it done, get it done. So as soon as the volunteers started talking about workflow, it got canned almost immediately. I don't want to, first of all, have to set up the workflows. I don't want to have to maintain the workflows. And by the way, that's what we pay people to do. So the ability to have some way to keep track of who's assigned to what they do, and they can go in with a single click and get done what's going to get done. I don't want the software to do my job for me. I want my people to do their job. And a side note of that was, again, a different company I was talking to, but they said, well, what if somebody goes in and deletes something? I said, all right, what's your question? They said, well, we need to be able to blame somebody. I said, all right, hold on. Again, I'm just trying to take a baby step from spreadsheets and give us something better for the next 2 or 3 years. One of the volunteers, when I told that story, they said, well, I don't expect the software to do all my training for me. I don't expect all the software to be the security guard out front trying to do it. In our company, if people maliciously destroy company material, we fire them. I don't need the software to do that for me. So again, all sorts of ancillary stories about that happy to share and go through with you. Okay. I think that's it for questions. Again, thank you so much for spending your time with me. If again, you can download from the GoToWebinar event the copy of the slide deck, copy of the detailed slide screenshots. If your organization would like to have a private event for your company, let me know. I can be contacted at jmc@pproso.com. Another question popped up. Why'd you call the company PPAP? All right, quick answer to that one. I started an enterprise quality company back in the late 80s. And when I was a young software entrepreneur, I guess you could call me, I was pretty excited to say, I've got this killer app. It does all the processes you need, and your people just need to figure out how to use it. And I guess back then that wasn't that bad of a view, but here's where PPAP came from. Currently, my view of software technology is people come first, process comes second, software comes last. PPAP, people, process, software. Again, thank you so much for your time. Reach out to me. I'd be happy to hear questions or comments. If you need anything else from me, let me know. Thank you.